welcome back to the channel. Today we are doing a transfer update and seeing where Sunderland will be come the end of the transfer window. If you enjoy the video, please like and subscribe, and also leave in the comments what you think Sunderland will do in the rest of the window. So let's start with incomings to Sunderland, and Sunderland have been very busy so far. They've signed 12 players. I'm not going to name them all because I'll be here all day, but it looks like they are wanting 2 more players in this transfer window. We've seen Jhon Lucumí linked from Bologna, and it seems like today we've had an update from them saying that they do not want to sell. The director of football has said that the deal is happening too late and they won't have enough time to replace him. Now, whether this is gesturing from them saying, no, we're not selling, to try and get more money out of Sunderland, that remains to be seen. I think Lucumí only has 12 months left in his contract, so there is that to factor in as well, that they would potentially lose him for free at the end of the season. So is this serious from them? I would probably argue not. I think that they are just playing the transfer window. We saw this with Granit Xhaka, that Erik ten Hag was like, we definitely aren't selling him, and then within a week they definitely were selling him. So that can happen. So is this one a goer? I don't know. I think this is 50-50 still. I feel like Sunderland, if they're that confident that they can get this deal done, they would still maintain being in there, and they still are. So if they weren't confident, I think they would have pulled out and moved on to different targets. We've seen Sunderland are pretty ruthless in the transfer market with that. So I think this is still potentially a go, and I definitely think that they will want to sign a centre-back. Moving on, Abdul Fatawu, he was linked earlier, I think this week, and that's an interesting transfer from Leicester. I think it was 28 million euros-ish was the price tag, so obviously a lot of money, and I still think Sunderland are interested in a forward player. Whether or not it's Fatawu, I don't know, but this is definitely an area that they want to improve on. I think Sunderland need kind of a forward. I say generic forward. What I mean is just somebody who can play across that forward line, whether it's on the right or the left, maybe can chip in up front or in the 10. I just think they want a sort of general forward player that can help them out with the depth there. So yeah, they're the 2 areas that I think Sunderland are looking at in particular. I don't know whether or not these will be the 2 players, but I certainly think between now and the end of the window, that will be what they're targeting from now until then. And in terms of budget, I think we can kind of deduce that Sunderland have around 50 to 60 million euros to spend, so about 50 million quid. That's a lot of money, you know, to look at, to sign in 2 players. As you get later into the deadline and closer to the deadline, not later to the deadline. If you get closer to the deadline, though, you have different sort of players become available. It can have knock-on effects, like if, for example, you know, you can see that with like Liverpool and Isak. So Liverpool signed Isak then needs to be replaced at Newcastle. So Newcastle signs someone, then that team needs to replace blah, blah, blah. You can have like transfer dominoes happening. So we could be in that transfer domino. We don't know about that yet. That, you know, say for example, Bologna signed another centre-back. That means Lucumí can come to Sunderland. That there are triggers that can happen in the transfer market, and we might see that happen. And the other thing worth noting is that Sunderland have loans available. They've got 1 domestic loan. So they've loaned in Mark Gio from Chelsea. They've got 1 more domestic. So if, for example, Chelsea, Liverpool, Arsenal, Man City have a player that they want to play in the Premier League and Sunderland are willing to take that risk, then they could do that. We can also do foreign loans, so loans with obligations to buy. You see, that's pretty common. It's what we did with Enzo Lefebvre. So it's possible there that Sunderland could do that sort of deal. There are flexible options within the transfer market. If they don't want to spend a ton of money right now, you can always do the loan with obligation to buy. But overall, I think Sunderland are more likely to do permanent transfers. We haven't been linked with masses of loans, so I think Sunderland will probably bring in, at my guess, 2 players from now at the end of the transfer window. The other question is do Sunderland desperately need these players? And I think it's centre-back. You look at what we have right now in terms of options. So Alderete you've got in there. You've obviously got Dan Ballard. You've got Luke O'Nien. You've got Agialise, I suppose. Am I missing anyone? Probably. Ronaldo can chip in there. Mukiele can chip in there. So I think they do actually need a centre-back. That's the long and short of it. I do think we need to add in there, add depth. Look, the Premier League, it's a hard season. Players get injured. Do you trust that Dan Ballard will stay fit all season? You know, probably not. He struggled to do that his whole career. So I think that they do need to bring in a centre-back. That's a position of priority. The forward player, I think that it would be lovely. I think it's more like this would be really, really nice if they could do that move. I think a forward player would give us a bit of an X factor on there. They clearly, you know, have issues with Mundle being injured. I don't know if there is massive trust in Patrick Roberts to be a Premier League player. So I think that they will probably do that. I think they probably will try their best to bring in a forward player, but I think the priority has to be centre-back, and if they have to spend more to bring in that top-quality centre-back, they probably would do that and then spend less on the winger, or potentially do a forward loan player as they did with Mark Gio. And I think at forward line, you look at the players we've got. So Mayenda, Isidore, Gio, Adingra, Tolby, Roberts, Mundell obviously to come back in the future. Is that enough to score enough goals in the Premier League? And that is probably the question that's going through Sunderland headquarters right now. I don't know. So I think that the priority has to be to potentially address that and bring in a forward player who can add goals to that forward line, because that's how you win games. You score goals. So outgoings, where to start with outgoings? And look, there's a long list here of potential outgoings. So apologies that I will be looking down here, but I can't remember them all off the top of my head. So you've got Blondie, goalkeeper, who's third choice last season. He's probably down to fourth choice now. He's been linked with a move away. If he wants to play football, it makes sense to sell him. Jensen Seelt obviously starred on the opening day. Club really like him. I think he's had a really good pre-season. But if he's going to be moving down the depth chart, probably the fifth choice, maybe sixth choice potentially, it makes sense to loan him. And I think a championship loan would be ideal for him. Possibly a team that is going to be scrapping towards the bottom of the league might be good. You know, throw him properly into the fire there. But I would love to see him get a championship move rather than move somewhere in Europe. Nectar Triantis, well, it looks like he's already on his way to the MLS. I think it's Minnesota United who are potentially signing him. So that one we can sort of cross off the list. That's one that's probably done. Aji Elise, he's currently injured, due back after the national break. We know that the manager really likes him, and at the start of last season he was the preferred centre-back, but can you trust his fitness? No. So do you loan him out? Do you sell him? I don't know, but I feel like Aji Elise in the Premier League, it feels unlikely that will happen unless there's an injury crisis. So I would say you move him on, whether it's sell or loan. Joe Anderson, it feels like that would be a sale. It feels like that makes sense to move him on. He's obviously going to play in the Premier League, so sell him if you can. Leo Hjelde, good around the group. Everyone seems to love him. So is there a part of the club that thinks, do you know what, maybe we'll keep Leo around, around the group? But that's not really conducive to Leo Hjelde having a thriving career. So I would say that Hjelde will probably leave, whether that's a loan or a permanent, I'm not sure, but I would suspect he would probably go. Niall Huggins, he's got a year left in his contract, but I think he has an option for another year. So the club could look and say, well, maybe we'll loan him out, see if he has a good year. Then we've got a player, say if we were to be relegated, fingers crossed. Obviously that doesn't happen, but a player that can play in the championship, as we know. So maybe they would look to loan him. But if he wants a new home and a new surrounding, I would be opening to letting Huggins go. Timothy Pembele, you sell him. Alexic, I think that would make sense to loan. The club obviously spent quite a bit of money for him in the championship, so I would loan Alexic out if possible, and I would prefer if he went to either England or Scotland. I just think he needs to learn the rough and tumble of football, so that would be me in terms of Alexic. Matete, I think I would sell. Abdul Bar, you'd sell. Paveda, you'd sell. Rusin, you'd sell. Hemir's already on the way. Abdullahi, I think you would try and loan out. He impressed me in pre-season, the games that he played. And Harrison Jones, I think the club like him, and maybe they've kind of half integrated him into the first team group. So maybe they would say, do you know what, he's good to have around the group and good to be sort of really the last of the depth and have somebody in there and train it. I don't know. But I think it would be good for him if he got a loan, get him some football and see what we've really got there in terms of him being a player. So it'd be good if he maybe went to Championship or League One and played a lot of games. And then you move on to the first teamers who could potentially leave. We've talked obviously a lot about Dan Neil on this channel quite a bit, and I think Sunderland should probably keep him. I think in terms of midfield, if we were to let a Dan Neil go, you probably would need to add a midfielder in there because we don't have the quality of depth in there. Look, and obviously the midfield sort of three we've got, and then we've got Enzo Lefebvre as well and Chris Rigg. But I think Dan Neil, it makes sense because he's natural cover for Granit Xhaka. So I would keep Dan Neil, try and get him tied to a new deal. That's the fact that, the most important factor here. If he doesn't sign a new deal, then I could see him potentially moving if they were given a really good offer. But Dan Neil, I would suspect stays, but I don't know. I think they could be tempted by a big offer. Dennis Serkin, I really like Dennis Serkin. I would love to see him in the Premier League. He's obviously came into the season with an injury, which isn't ideal. We've brought in 2 new left backs, so there is the issue of will he actually play? He's only got 12 months left in his contract. Difficult. You know, I would love to see him stay at Sunderland, but I can see if a good offer comes in that the club may look to move him on. Maybe that's why they brought in 2 new left backs. I don't know. So Dennis Serkin, I'm 50-50 on. I would love to see him stay and thrive in the Premier League, but I just don't know if he will. I do think he was one of the best left backs in the Championship last season when he was fit. So there's a lot to sort of weigh up there. I put Chris Rigg in here mainly because there's chatter about loaning him out, and I disagree with that. I think Chris Rigg will stay. So I'm just gonna cross that one off straight away. But people might have said maybe Chris Rigg will go out on loan. I think they won't loan him out. I think he's obviously going to be sort of the number probably 5 choice in that midfield. And look, we're going to have the African Cup of Nations. We're going to lose players to injuries. Chris Rigg will play in this team this season. So I think Chris Rigg stays. Patrick Roberts, we talked about this with signing a forward player. If we sign a new winger, Patrick Roberts moves further down the pecking order. He is probably, when everyone is fit there, going to be like 5th choice. Chris Rigg can also play on the wing. Enzo Lefebvre can play on the wing. I really like Roberts. I think he's a cracking player, and I'd love to see him play in the Premier League for Sunderland. But if he wants to play at his age, I can see the club selling him on. I think he would probably get a decent price as well. If you're a Championship club and you're looking at Patrick Roberts being available, I think you probably would try and sign him. So I could see Sunderland getting, you know, a good sort of 3, 4, 5 million pounds for him. Which is a shame. I'd love to see Patrick Roberts stay, and I think you can offer Sunderland something in the Premier League, but it just doesn't feel like that's happening right now. But maybe if we're losing games, if we're losing this weekend against Burnley, maybe the club will, you know, and Reggie Slibry will bring Patrick Roberts on, and we'll see that, you know, he's going to be there as a threat when the game is tight. Obviously, last weekend we won the game 3-0, so there was no need to make that sort of change in the game. And the last one to look at is Alan Brown. I feel like he must be 7th choice central midfielder. If he's happy to be 7th choice central midfielder and happy to sort of plug a gap in that squad there, then I suppose you could keep him. But I would think, again, at his age, I think he's 30 now, he'll want to play football. He would slot into most Championship teams. You'd probably get a decent fee for him. It's like 2, 3, 4 million quid. I would probably move him on. I just think it's almost unfair to have somebody there not playing, but he might fancy himself to play in the Premier League, and he might think, you know what, I'm going to give it a season and see if I can break into this team, and fair play to him if that's what he picks. Don't think it'll be expensive in terms of wages. So if he wants to stay, the club are happy for him to be about the place. He seems like somebody who's good around the squad. Then I wouldn't be opposed to Alan Brown staying. And I think all these first team players I've mentioned, I'm happy for them to stay. It's more just if they want to move and the club do right by them and say, do you know what, like, if you want to play, we'll let you move on. So by my count, that's like upwards of 16 to 18 players that could be moved on in the final sort of week of the transfer window. So it's going to be really, really busy for Sunderland. Obviously not all them fringe players will leave. It's more of a, I think it'll be good for them if they get moves, the one we talked about before we got the first team players. And I think it'll be very, very busy towards the end of the transfer window. Incomings, I think it'll be 2, maybe 3 if something particularly special comes up. But I think Sunderland will sign a centre-back, and I think they'll sign a forward player. That's where I think they'll make moves. And maybe if they were to lose like a Dan Neil in central midfield, maybe they've got an idea of who they'd go for to fill that sort of position and be the cover for Granit Xhaka. So it's possible that there could be additions brought in if players are sold that are in the first team squad currently. Let me know what you think anyway. This has been a longer video than normal. I normally don't like to rant on for, you know, plus 10 minutes, but there was a lot to get through in terms of transfers. Please let me know what you think is going to happen in terms of the transfer window from now until the end. Please comment as well what you expect Sunderland to do in the transfer window. And we'll catch you for the next video where we will be reflecting on hopefully a win away at Burnley this weekend. So thanks for watching. We'll catch you for the next one.